All right. So welcome, everybody. My name is Sharon Friedner, and I'm the Associate Director of SPARC. We used to be called the Career Options Resource Center. Now it's SPARC, which stands for Supporting Your Purpose with Action, Resources, and Connections. And tonight's program is called Getting Paid to Write, 3 Alums, 3 Paths. And this is co-hosted by the Hampshire Writers Advisory Council. There is a website for that, which I will put in the chat. And you can see more upcoming events like this one. This advisory council is a great group of alums who are writers of all different kinds, who have agreed to support the Hampshire communities of writers, of student and recent alum writers, to explore the landscape of writing careers and to help demystify both the opportunities and the challenges that writers face. So this event is one that we were talking about a lot, and the whole idea of it is, how do you use your writing to make a living? Because that's a question we get all the time. And at Hampshire, you learn a lot about how to put together a really good story, and you hone your craft as a writer by usually writing what is most important to you and things that are near and dear to your heart. But you find that most people say that it's really hard, very challenging to make a living writing your own stories. Not impossible, but not easy. So the question we always get is it possible to make a living as a writer, and especially as a creative writer? And the answer to that is yes, and there are many different ways to do it. So today we're so lucky to have 3 alums here who are doing it and who can speak to what it looks like for them. So I'm going to just introduce them briefly, and they can wave to you so you can see who they are. And then they'll get more in depth into their stories, so you'll hear more. So we have Anne Pinkerton, 91F, who's the Director of Communications and Marketing at Hampshire. And Jessie Vendituoli is here, 98F. And Jessie is the Strategic Communications Director at an organization whose name is, I think, my favorite organization name ever. It's called Solidarity of Unbridled Labor. And Arpita Kumar is here, 03F, and Arpita is a senior content strategist at Google. And Arpita has the really cool job of creating the personality for Google Assistant. And so I'm really excited to hear more about that. So the structure of the program tonight is that each panelist will have between 7 and 9 minutes to speak. And you'll listen. We may come back to the panelists after we go through all 3 to see if there's any final words, and then we'll open it up for questions. But if you have a question as we're going along, you can always pop that into the chat, and we'll try to address it if we can, and if not, we'll do it during the question and answer session. Good? Everyone good? Yeah. So Anne, we'll start with you. And basically the structure is to start by telling us what you're doing now, explain what you're doing now, and then how you got there, and talk to us about the challenges and also what you love about your work and why it's important, and maybe some advice for students and young alums.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Spark. And thanks for all of you to be here tonight and my wonderful co-alums here who I'm in awe of. I think I am in a particularly funny spot to be talking to you since I'm promoting our college. But it's a great, great honor. And it did take me a long time to get here. And I really love my job. I think it's important to note that I am a creative writer and I do write on the side. And that's really important to me, but it doesn't feel like it's in opposition to what I do professionally at all. In fact, I tell people I'm a professional storyteller. Yeah, it's marketing communications, but to me, it's always through the lens of storytelling. So as the director of communications and marketing, and I think it's important to say marketing communications to people instead of just communications, so people don't think I work in like telecom industry, which does happen if I just say communications. I like to think of it is an also a unique pairing other than just straight up marketing and sales. It's to me that's I'm kind of allergic to that terminology, but naming is its own thing. At any rate, I support the mission, goals, and brand of our dear college um, through storytelling. And what that means is that on a day to day basis, I am doing anything from working on a news story that would appear on our website and be shared on social media channels and come through our regular e newsletter to promoting events in various channels to and I mean ranging from things like this to commencement to the big conferences we have, that sort of thing. um, I assist with a lot of admissions efforts, so I do a lot of work with recruiting prospective students and parents, also through storytelling by profiling the amazing students we have, the faculty members who are teaching and doing research and exhibits and you name it. I love profiling our wonderful alums, like the ones on this call, because to me they are the product of the education that we offer at Hampshire, and so they're the outcomes of the experience. Um, I also facilitate digital and traditional marketing through advertising, which is probably the most salesy thing I do. Um, and I assist with our PR efforts. I also am integrally involved with supporting our fundraising crew. So I sometimes am working on traditional print mailings. And those are kind of the tactical things. But what I really, really love about it is that I get to talk to interesting people every day and tell their stories. And to me, that's a very authentic way to demonstrate what's going on the ground and what it can do for students, faculty, staff, anybody who's ever involved in the Hampshire community. And I am obviously passionate about it as a place because it helped me become me. But I'm also really, really energized by the fact that we're constantly evolving and experimenting and radically transforming education kind of outfit that keeps me on my toes. It makes things lively. It's never ever dull. I shift gears a lot. I now am blessed to have two wonderful staff people working for me. And I also have student workers in my office from time to time and a whole array of vendors who support me. So it's a really multifaceted job. It's challenging in terms of juggling and project management, but it is, to me, very exciting because no day is ever the same, and the goals change a lot, and the priorities change a lot, and sometimes there's too much. But I find it very exciting to get behind something mission oriented like this. So getting here meant that I worked largely for nonprofit organizations for the last 25 years doing exactly this kind of work. And it's ranged from doing graphic design to website redesigns to strategic marketing plans to, you name it. I think I've touched a lot of it. I remember one job where I had to figure out how to design an awning for a building. I mean, I think the beauty is that as a Hampshire student, and graduate, you just learn how to figure it out. So people do ask me whether I studied communications, if I have a degree in communications, and the answer is no. I studied poetry and printmaking at Hampshire, and I was very big about putting words and pictures together. So I'm very delighted that I still put words and pictures together every day of my life. I did go on and get an MFA in creative nonfiction when I was 41, so I was late to that, but it was a great experience. And as I said, I do my own writing on the side. I feel like all of it feeds into every other activity that I do, though, because again, it's all to me storytelling, and that's the most authentic way for me to promote the place where we are. Um, what do I love about my challenge? I think the challenges with my job are really just that there are always 100 different priorities, and being in a central communications office on a college campus means you're serving many masters, because everybody thinks that their thing is the most important thing, and they're not wrong. It's always a juggling act, and so for me, it's always like over here we're working on students, and here we're working on donors, and here we're working on current students. It's like, it's a constant shift in what audience I'm speaking to and what goals I have when I'm talking to them. But I absolutely adore getting to hear people's stories and getting to present them on the page, online, through print mail, newsletters, whatever. Like, all the channels are fun to me. They're all different. They reach people in different ways. And I think the more that life has turned into a very digital place for people, the more I've been really interested to understand all, and I'm sure Arpita has a much keener sense of the digital landscape in terms of this, but having started as a print designer really in this and then being involved in a major website overhaul right now, I think one of the things that's interesting is you can write for all these channels, and then you can be as specialized as being a search engine optimization writer, that there are these really, really nitty gritty and granular ways that copywriting actually is both creative and very effective in terms of being functional. And again, not my area of particular expertise, but I'm always interested in the different ways, short form, long form, online, print, web. They're different kinds of writing for different audiences and different needs. And I just find it really interesting because it's changing all the time, and the goals are always moving. So I'm always challenged and always learning. And I think, again, as a Hampshire student, I'm always into learning. So I admit I was a little bit less excited about learning about TikTok, which we just did. So I'm grateful I have some new staff to help with that because I've officially gotten a little bit old. But largely, I'm very excited about the fact that being a marketing communications person means I'm always learning new platforms, new channels, new ways of reaching people and connecting with them. And to me, that's a very powerful and very exciting thing. So I guess my advice for students and young alums who are interested in writing, I've never felt like it was a sellout to do this kind of a thing professionally. I get a lot of pleasure and joy out of it. Um, I think that as long as you find a niche professionally that feels like you're still being able to utilize your creative use of language, then you're good. I mean, there are so many ways to do it, and mine is just one example. It just happens to be pretty multifaceted in its day to day, which I find fun. But as I said, some other forms of professional writing are super niche and also really thrilling in their own way, because I think you get to be a super professional in one kind of way of utilizing language, and that's exciting too. So let me know if you have questions.
And thank you so much. I always feel like when I look at materials that come from Hampshire, they just flow so well that I forget that somebody sat and actually wrote those. It's kind of like when you look at the back of a cereal box and you're like, wait, somebody actually wrote that thing about heritage flakes. Like, it just seems so naturally there. And it's just incredible, the work that you do. Thank you.
That's super kind. And let me just say, because this is sort of funny, I started in skincare, and I remember being a kid and reading shampoo bottles and thinking someone wrote this. Yeah. And then I went and did that.
Nice.
That's a job.
That's really cool. All right, so we'll hear from Jesse next. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. But I want to say to people, if you think of questions now, by the end, you'll forget them. So jot them down or even put them in the chat now so that you don't forget what you wanted to ask once we hear from everybody. All right, so I'll hand it over to.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I have, and there are so many things that you said that really resonated with me too, because I think what the kind of work that we do is fairly similar in a way, but the way that you work in-house, I work at more on a consultant level, an agency level. So anyway, I'll get to that. But my name is Jessie Nathan Vendituoli. I'm what am I, 98F, and I work as the, like Sharon said, I'm the strategic communications director at a small brand design firm here in Vermont. That's called Solidarity of Unbridled Labor, which is both a charming title and a lot. um, so we're a really small brand agency. There's only, I think there's about 17 of us now. And we work with a lot of different clients. Some are more local, based here in Vermont. And then my two primary clients are both based in Oslo, and they're global clients, so large companies that have a global footprint. And incidentally, there's one other copywriter on the team who I had the great fortune of hiring, also from Hampshire. So we are a 2-woman Hampshire alum copy team here at this tiny business in Vermont, even though I've never actually met her in person. So we have a big representation there. But so essentially what I do is I work in brand strategy, and then I look at that all through a language lens. So most of the people in our studio are graphic designers, and we have a really strong graphic focus, but I am the one who kind of brings the language focus in. And as we've already talked about, everything you see in the written environment was written by not all of it was written by someone anymore, I suppose, but most of it has been written by a person or programmed by a person. So that's what I do. But I tend to do it on a larger sort of strategic level, and not so much like the copy on a shampoo bottle, but more like the guiding copy that the organizations use internally and to some degree externally to guide their messaging. So specifically, we use a particular approach to guiding brand development. So we look at brand positioning and defining brand purpose for people. And, every brand agency has their own bespoke version of this. They're all doing the same thing, more or less. I'm probably not allowed to say that, but it's true. And they're all, highly specific to that agency, but they're all essentially trying to get to that same idea of what is your purpose and what's your positioning in the market. So we use that as sort of our strategic North Star that guides everything that we do from there, whether that's copy or design or advising them on internal operational choices, that kind of thing. So, going from that, I would say I do mostly narrative development. So that can be like large scale narrative development on a new initiative within an organization, or it can be helping them identify the tone of voice they want to use on a website. It can be, it also gets into naming. I do a lot of naming. So I don't generally name product level, but I will name more like a category for an organization. So if they're we have a client right now who's getting into really trying to up their credibility about sustainability, surprise, surprise. And so I'm helping them craft a narrative that really connects the dots between the tactical choices that they're making on a strategic level within the organization and how they talk about that both internally and externally. So one of the other things that we really do is we're always trying to balance, and Anne, you started to speak to this a little bit, but we always are balancing the sort of tactical with the craft. And I find that really interesting. It's the thing that I love the most about this. And those of you who've been on one other call that we did, I said this before, but there's something that's like really very similar to poetry about this to me, because word choice is so very particular. So I love that blending of that sort of more tactical aspect with this extremely close reading of every choice of words, because that has such a cascade effect through everything that's done when you're really doing that top level guiding approach with people. So for people who are really into words and really into, finding unique ways of expressing rational, emotional, and cultural ideas, it's really fascinating on a daily basis to try to find exactly the right way to put this that resonates with who a brand is, and more importantly, who they're trying to speak to. So I really love that. And I think it's a fun puzzle. And on top of that, we're always trying to help organizations like look one step ahead, right? Because they're always in this very operational, bogged down kind of place. And so we're there to provide this bigger picture and say, this is what's happening on a larger scale. This is how to think about this in a longer term way or in a bigger way, and kind of be that outside voice. And that's also really helpful. So how did I get here? I got here by being bogged down in operational details myself, largely. I have a broad sort of business experience. My last job was running a company. At one point we were doing a kind of brand rework with the company I was running, and I realized that I really should be on the other side of the table. I was like, the person who we're working with on this, that's what I want to do. And so I went on maternity leave, and I decided to take that as a time to reorient, and decided to get out of running businesses and into this idea of helping them align themselves with the values that they find important and the purpose that they want to be. I feel like I've always been a writer, but I always kind of took it for granted. Writing and researching is something that I just kind of did in the background, and I never really understood the value in that itself. It was always a means to an end. So recognizing that that wasn't the case, that was actually a valuable skill set in and of itself, was a real aha moment for me. I worked on a master's degree in food writing, and so I did that for a while and published in food. And I've done a bunch of independent historical research about food. My Hampshire Div 3 was on how to incorporate an obscure home abortion modality into midwifery practice, and looking at the medical, historical, and legal ramifications of that. And it's sort of tragically relevant in a way that I couldn't have foreseen 20 years ago. But basically, I feel like what happened at Hampshire was I learned how to write, I learned how to think critically, I learned how to research, I learned how to be able to apply that skill set to anything. So that if I had a board of directors say to me, we need a CapEx budget tomorrow, and I didn't really know what that was, I could get them a CapEx budget tomorrow. And if I have a client who asks for a list of speakers for their leadership conference, I have the skill set to like make something out of that. And I learned how to do all of that at Hampshire, absolutely, without a doubt. And I think that most people who I work with who don't have that kind of background don't know how to do that stuff to the degree that those of us who have that background really do. So I think that's been invaluable. Let's see. Challenges. I think the biggest challenge for me is not having a diversity of tasks. Honestly, I would prefer, like, I miss spreadsheets. I miss, managing people. Those are things that I really enjoy. And writing is a really intense discipline. I can't listen to music while I'm writing. I can't be engaged in a physical act and let my mind wander. It's just a really, really focused practice. And doing that as a full-time job is a lot. It's really, really, really a lot. And so, that's really a caveat about getting into the business of doing that. And I think it's probably a different cadence than somebody who's doing more of a creative writing cadence, because there is this sort of grind of doing that and delivering every day and in a really super focused way. Advice or wisdom for y'all. I think, everybody always says like, it's important to show up. And I think that that's really true. Like when I was in grad school, I was in a class with the food editor of the Boston Globe. And she was like, your assignment is X, Y, and Z, go do this assignment. And the person with the best one will get published in the Globe in the next edition, the next version of the Globe. And I was like, yes, I'm like, I was like super competitive. And I was like, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to get it. I'm going to do it. And I went out of my way to do the assignment. I was the only one who turned it in. And I was published in the Globe that like next week. And it just shocked me that like nobody else took that opportunity. And so through that one experience, I got my first byline. I got a relationship with an editor who went on to publish my work for several more years after that, which then led to, you know, building credibility in the field so that I could publish more work. And it all came from just being like, is this just like a stupid assignment for my grad school, or is this actually an opportunity? And like, how can I make an opportunity in that? So I think that like so many people take that kind of stuff for granted. So I think that's really good advice. I think the other greatest advice is to never write for free. It's work, it's hard work, it's expertise. Working for exposure, I think, undercuts the entire profession, and I think it's really destructive. I know that's a controversial opinion, and a lot of people will have their reasons that the opposite has worked for them. But from my perspective, I think that it's really important to, you know, to keep value in the profession. And it also sets apart people who actually understand the craft of writing from people who just use words to express a thing. And there's a difference. There's really a difference in the quality of the output. And I think it's important to maintain that sense of professionalism by saying like, no, as a writer, like, we need to be paid for our time doing this. And it's really, really tempting and really, really hard to have that discipline. But I really believe in it. So that's what I have to say. I have lots of other thoughts. So anybody who wants to talk more, I am game.
Jessie, thank you so much. And I'm intrigued by that last thing you said. So I definitely have more questions about that. I wonder if other people do too, but I'm going to hold them until later. But if I forget, somebody remind me. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to turn it over to Arpita now, and it's sort of like, and now for something completely different.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I am really honored to share this space with such amazing alums. My God, I'm so blown away by all that you do. And that was amazing, amazing advice, Jessie. I wish I met you earlier in life, because I've done a lot of free work in the film world, and it was really miserable. So anyways, so my name is Arpita Kumar, and I work in the field it's called user experience, or UX, which basically means it's how users interact with any form of technology or technological service. So my everyday role here is to sort of design experiences or sort of craft strategies that make users interact with tech in a way that's more elegant, it's easier, it's useful to them, and also delightful to them. So the lens, my UX lens, is content strategy, which basically means I use words to delight users. I use content to make their experience of tech easier and humanize tech for them. My role, so I'm a senior content strategist on the Google Assistant's personality team, which basically means, so Google Assistant is like Google's version of Alexa or Siri. So it's this digital assistant, it's an artificial intelligence. So, and every time you interact with that disembodied voice on a Pixel phone or Google Home, and you ask it questions like, as if it's a character, you know, so you ask it questions like, what do you look like, or can you sing? You get responses that I have crafted. So my basic job is to create content strategy that makes the Google Assistant's character empathetic, fun, and delightful for users, as well as it helps them build a connection with the users as well. My journey to this role has been very non-traditional, just like Hampshire. At Hampshire, I studied film and literature, and I, after that, for several years, toiled away in the world of independent filmmaking, writing and directing films, and doing a lot of free labor. Regret it for exposure. But eventually, like my script writing and my films started leading to more opportunities. I made space for myself in TV writer's room, had got the opportunity to work with like legendary showrunners like Issa Rae. And it was around that time that, I got this email from a Google recruiter asking me if I wanted to craft the personality of their artificial intelligence. And during the first call with the recruiter was the first time I ever heard the word UX. Like, she explained it to me what UX was. Like, it was just like, I was so not from that world at all. But once I started the role, I realized like sort of my experience, my education at Hampshire, my experience in sort of filmmaking, and just sort of kind of like the kind of curious person that I was, like, had kind of prepared me to take on this role, where, it was overwhelming because, you're suddenly put into a room with like all these engineers, and they're throwing all this jargon around. You're like, oh my God, I have no idea. And then they just leave you with like some of it. I was like, I'm like, am I going to break Google if I do this? Like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen next? But the basic of it is it's all about actually still storytelling. And something that like I realized that the tech world has really realized that storytelling is a function of the human mind, and we just do it all the time. That's why, like, we name our cars, or we have pet rocks, like we like to anthropomorphize things. And so if Google created this artificial intelligence and was not to create sort of a narrative around it, a story around it, build a character or personality for it, the user was going to do it. And, us doing it in a way was helping us build an empathetic connection with the user. And also sort of like artificial intelligence is such a new technology to build a persona that is friendly, that is delightful, that kind of helps you navigate this new tech, makes it easier for the user to use it too. So humanizing it is such a big part of sort of like getting people onboarded, like that's the term they use, and like sort of learn about how to navigate this new world of artificial intelligence. It makes it also a little bit less scary for many people too, if it like sort of sounds, it talks, and like, gets the references that like people do in everyday life. And I think one of the things that sort of like, because I was like really curious how I kind of got on the radar of Google, and it was like, it was the kind of the films I made or the scripts I wrote were always about characters who were at the margins of American society or had like hyphenated identities and sort of had a very distinct voice or a very different point of view. And that sort of like made a lot of like the cinema I created stand out, like for my other jobs as well, but for this role especially. And I think that's something that like Hampshire was really great at, in sort of like pushing us to sort of like have our voice, put it out there, not be afraid to explore what we are interested in or what we have to say or what we love, and not just do things at the surface level, but to go deeper. So I would always explore things through my filmmaking and script writing, and I would go like further into understanding them. And that kind of also really helps with this role too, whether it's just like simple like troubleshooting something that's tech related, but also just like while we are kind of pushing the envelope in terms of how artificial intelligence and human interact and how to like further this persona. It all like sort of come, and it's also sort of like we're building this plane while we're flying it, so it all kind of like comes into play because at Hampshire, like, you know, you had to take charge of your own education, and like you were sort of building your education while you were running with it. It's the same year, like it's such a new field. We're like figuring it out as we go. Like I kind of, in cinema, 100 years ago, we had these Lumieres, which were these like 58-second film rolls. And it was just like, the film was just like people walking out of a factory, and that was a Lumiere. It was like such a big thing for humanity then 100 years ago. I feel like that's where we are with artificial intelligence, and we're kind of figuring it out. And so it's a space where things are breaking all the time. There's no structure, there's no process. You can't, like, you really have to just be very independent, very unafraid to sort of fail and try again. And I think Hampshire created that space, that psychological safety with, you know, us being in charge of our own education to, be like, sort of give us that sort of like, that safety to like, you know, you can try, and if you fail, that's okay. Let's try again and let's figure it out. So that's kind of like the space that I am in. It's exciting, it's scary, it's new, it's it's unpredictable. And let's see, what do I love? What do I love about my job, and what are my challenges? I think I love that every day I'm exposed to sort of like cutting edge tech, or like a little bit of the future. And it's also very rewarding to see like some of the work that I've done has had a positive impact on people all around the world. And that's really amazing. The challenge that I have is actually, I think it's not unique to this role. I am a young mom, and sort of like balancing having a child under 5 during a pandemic and working full time was it was just a real struggle, and continues to be so. I'm so sleep deprived. So I guess it's like, it's not just my story, it's like a story of a lot of people around the world. And the advice, and any advice I have for students, I guess my biggest advice is you do you. I remember when I was in high school, I grew up in India, so it was a high school in India, and it was at a time, I feel like the country has changed a lot since then, but it was at a time where we only had 2 kind of professional roles or journeys that people would go on. It was like either you would go in medicine or engineering. And so I was only in like these hard sciences classes. And I remember in one class conversation, I said that, oh, actually, I want to go ahead and learn creative writing, and I want to go to college for creative writing. And this like classmate turns around and jeers, and she's like, creative writing? Nobody ever makes money when they do creative writing. There's like no future in that. And I mean, at that moment, I didn't know how to respond to this person at that time. And like, I don't even think I knew if there was a future in this space at all. I mean, this was like, 2002, and like, there was artificial intelligence, but the form that it exists now in all our homes, and we have smart devices everywhere, that world did not exist at all. And I had no way of knowing that I'd end up on this journey, but like, I couldn't imagine doing or studying anything else except what I loved, which was like filmmaking and writing. And so I just was like, well, we'll see where I end up, if I end up homeless, or if I like make a career of it. And thank God I ended up where I am. But even then, like, at 17, I just like couldn't imagine doing anything else. And so I'm glad I was true to myself. And that's my thing, like, do you. And that's my whole thing.
Arpita, thank you so much. And it just strikes me how related being a screenwriter for film is to writing the character of Google Assistant. It's creating a character. Mm-hmm. So it's just a really unexpected and very cool connection.
Yeah, and it came about, like this whole field just came about in the last, what, like 6, 8, 7, like 7, 8 years, you know, so that's also just, you never know what's there out there in the world, is my like thing.
So panelists, I'm hoping you will have plenty of time, because if you have something just bubbling up, but I just feel like I have to go back to Jesse's comment about not writing for free. So I want to start the question session with that, and I'll ask it more specifically, but also as people are thinking about questions, now would be a great time to start putting questions in the chat. And my question for all the panelists is that, so that's a very strong statement, not to write for free. And I felt a lot of resonance with you for that. But I do wonder if there is an appropriate time to write for free. And especially what I'm thinking about is that if you are a student and you want to get a job doing some kind of writing or communications or even journalism, but nobody sees your writing because you don't want to write for free, how does anybody know what kind of writing you do in order to find you the way, you know, people found Arpita through the films that she did? So can you dive more into that, like when it might be appropriate to write for free, or what it means to write for free and when not to, and when maybe it's okay? And any of you can jump in from your own experience.
I guess I'll start. So I guess when I say don't write for free, I think I should specify what I'm talking about a little bit more. I suppose what I mean is when someone approaches you and asks you to provide a service or a product of writing. I think writing for free is probably a very different thing when it's you putting yourself out there, whether, I mean, even in the context of a newsletter or, people, a Substack or something like that, people are often paid to do that, but you have to at least get people interested. So, I think that there are ways to build your audience privately through your own personal writing and your own personal brand as a writer, or your own personal work as a writer, that doing that for free is a very different thing than what I was referring to. But what I was referring to is really more like somebody who says, we have this opportunity for you, and frames it in that way and says, if you take this opportunity to deliver us this piece of work, but we're not going to pay you and you get exposure. That's what I'm talking about. That is not about building your own capabilities as a writer, or, working through a process that's either part of an education or part of, putting your own thoughts out there, but it's really an exploitative arrangement between someone who's asking you to do something for them. So that's what I'm referring to. And I don't mean to imply that you should be paid vast sums because, I the first time that somebody asked me to write for free, I said, I don't write for free. And it was a very small Vermont publication. And she said, okay, I went back to our board and we can pay you $125. And this was for like a full feature article, like interviews, 4 rounds of revision, like the full thing. And I was like, great. I won't write for free, but I will do this for $125. And it was really just about the principle of that, of like, it's not okay for you to approach me and ask me to do this for you for no money. And from there, you kind of work up from there and building relationships and building a portfolio and manage to not, whatever it is that you do in your day job. But yeah, so that's a little bit more context of what I mean when I say not to write for free. But I very much agree also, Arpita, with what you said about, you do you. I mean, that's my perspective. I think that it has some, destructive patterns for people who are writers. But I'm not trying to judge how people find success. It's more just like thinking about writing as a craft and as a career, for the good of that. Writing, on demand for free doesn't feel like the right thing to me. I don't know if either of you want to expand on that at all.
Well, I'll jump in just for a second because partly because I'm a little like, because I have two writer personas. I have a really hard time with my creative work giving it away, but I do occasionally do it for the exposure. And I recently ended up in an anthology with two of like my favorite, most heroic writers ever, and I was like pinching myself, and that was totally a freebie. But it felt really good and very successful to be like in such good company. But I'm 1,000,000% with you that I think all writing that is quality writing should be compensated, and I think we all go to school for it, we practice it. It's like at some core level, I recognize that I'm getting paid like a fraction of a cent for like most things I do. If you really quantify all of the work and history and experience and learning that goes into it, um, I think it's really unfortunate that we don't have a better kind of system of rewarding the more cultural kinds of. This happens with music too, being like people think music should be free. It's the same sort of thing. Our culture has changed in terms of like what we assume should be given for free and what shouldn't. I totally agree with you that when we were talking about like a specific project, like being assigned a huge article, that is astonishing to want that for free. If someone wanted me to write a whole, catalog for them for free, I would feel equally like hell no, because it's so astronomically labor intensive, and it is exploitative, I think, at some level, core level. And I agree with you too that like, when I get thrown $50 for an essay I place somewhere, I feel much better about it than when I get zero. Um, I think the one thing I would say is that occasionally I do like what I consider like volunteer writing, and that feels okay to me giving it away. Like I've assisted. My mom's a really avid. She's a very avid volunteer with the League of Women Voters, and she loves to work voter registration events. And so I oftentimes like help her write and copyright and edit things for her. But that to me feels like volunteerism. Like that's my community service kind of.
Totally, totally.
So I think that's a good example of when it's okay to give it away because you feel like you're supporting something you believe in and you're just offering your skill in lieu of money or something. It's like a donation. So that part feels really good to me. And I guess again, like if you are in a position where you're going to be part of something that's exciting to you, like an anthology or whatever, and that again feels like your success, it's a little bit different. But I applaud you wholeheartedly on supporting writers being paid.
I failed in like I did so much free work and while I was like working in film. So I'm like I'm just like, oh my God, where were you guys first? Like I needed you like 10 years ago. But yeah, I don't have any advice here. Like I just I didn't know any other way, and I would just like agree, even though it was kind of tricky because oftentimes they would be like, yeah, we're going to pay you this much for like being a script supervisor or something on set. And then in the middle of the shoot, they'd be like, oh, we ran out of budget, so we have no money to pay you. That would happen a lot too, So there were like a lot of like exploitative situations like that I've been in. And it's just funny, I was talking to like my other Hampshire friends. I didn't realize I had like links of my films. I had shared out to a lot of like professors around the world for free. And then I guess I forgot to like kind of keep my Vimeo account going, and it kind of died and they lost access to it. And then suddenly I got all these emails from like Germany and around the world be like, hey, I can't access your films. I have in my syllabus. And there's other filmmakers like, dude, you should there's like a whole, like you can ask professors to pay you. And I was just like, what? I didn't even know that. And I just like felt so awkward now, like after years being like, hey, actually, like if you pay me like this educational fee, I'll like start my Vimeo again. And I was like, yeah, let me figure it out. And I haven't got, because I feel so like, and I'm just like, okay, now they'd be like, oh, she has a Google job and still she's asking for money. So I was just like, this is such an awkward, uncomfortable situation. But it's funny, like my Hampshire college friends still are like, no, you made that film and you invested your time, you should ask for it. I'm still working on it, guys. I just like really struggle with being like, pay what is due to me. I just like really struggle with that. Like I also like need to like figure out how to negotiate for salary and all of that stuff. I struggle. So I'm learning. I'm still learning.
I'm with you. I'm still learning.
Maybe Sharon, that could be a whole other thing you guys can offer is like how to stand up for yourself and negotiate. That would
Oh my
be
God, I've never
super
been
useful.
able. I like straight up accept I'm like, okay, I just want to get out of this like really uncomfortable situation right now.
I love that as a topic. We'll have to find someone, Jesse, maybe you, if you're really good at that.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think I could learn a lot about it still. And I mean, many of us could, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So people who are here on the call, now would be a good time if you want to show your face, you can or not. I'd love to see questions. This is a question. It says, thank you all for the talk tonight. Anne, you mentioned that you've completed an MFA after having been working in the field already. I'm curious if you can speak to how going through an MFA impacted your approach to or relationship with your work in marketing and communications. Thank you.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you, Walker. That's a great one. It's so interesting. I was already in the field and I didn't go back for my MFA in marketing communications. I went back in creative nonfiction, but it has remarkable relationship to the writing that I do for work, especially because one of my favorite things, as I mentioned, is actually telling the stories of people. And I took a really profoundly meaningful class on profiles when I was in grad school that really helped me learn how to interview people effectively and get them to tell me the best stories. And so that was like an incredibly direct line that I've taken with me to everything. And that ranges from writing a short blurb that goes with a social media post to writing like a full scale website story. So certainly that. I also just think that even though creative nonfiction is one of those things that people define a little differently depending on who you are, creative doesn't mean it's fiction. It's about shaping the story, but it's very much about. It was for me, at least, having been a poetry undergrad, learning to write long form more effectively had everything to do with the work that I do now. I mean, I bring all of the same kind of craft sensibility to the kinds of writing I do, even if I'm working on a brochure. I mean, I think my approach has evolved from being a little bit less marketing speak than it used to be, and a little more like I'm trying very hard to lean into a more authentic kind of way of delivering people's experiences of what they're doing or have done. So I actually think there's a very, very through line. I found, again, that the two things were utterly complementary.
Thank you, Anne. That's so cool to hear. Now I want to know what you asked.
It's all interwoven, like I think
yeah.
It's just, again, it's about thinking about your audience and what you're trying to communicate and just figuring out the best way to craft the messaging.
I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking we probably don't really have time for another question. But does anybody have something that you really want to ask and we can maybe have a briefer answer? You can put it in the chat. Maybe not. So let's go around. I just wonder, panelists, if you have any last words, and it's okay if not, you can just say, nope, that's it. But if there's anything, any little last thing that you would like to share, now would be a good time to do that.
I think I'll put myself out there and just say that if anybody has a question outside of here that comes to them in the middle of the night or the shower or whatever, like, I'm around. I'm at apinkerton@hampshire.edu, and you can email me anytime. And I always love talking writing and storytelling, so I'm happy to talk to anyone.
Thank you. And I think all of our panelists are on the Hampshire network. And if you haven't heard of that, it's a platform that Hampshire is using to connect the entire Hampshire community. So that includes staff, faculty, students, even parents, I think. So everybody involved in the Hampshire community, and that's Hampshire Network. If you just Google Hampshire Network, it'll come right up. And I'm going to put a whole bunch of links in the chat. I hope it's not too confusing to do it this way. Did it go? There we go. So this is how you can access more events like this and access the work that we do at SPARC. So the Writers Council has lots of events coming up. And in fact, there will be one about getting an MFA probably in the fall or next spring. It's on the docket. I can't remember exactly when. So if you get on the Writing Careers mailing list, which is there in the chat, you will find out about upcoming Writers Council events and occasionally an internship or some other writing opportunity that we pop on there. There's also a SPARC mailing list. If you want to know about internships, you can go that way and get on the SPARC internships, and you'll find out about all the events that we're doing, as well as internships, and the Writers Council events will be on there. And our SPARC website is there. And if any of you are wanting to talk more individually about your future as a writer or anything else, or help with a resume, anything like that, grad school, we do all of that stuff. And there's a ton of resources on our website, so you can check it out. And there's the link. And here's a link to the Hampshire Writers Advisory Council webpage, where you can see everybody else. There are, I think, 10 members on there. There are bios of everybody and upcoming events, as well as recordings of past events. So it's a great site. There's lots of stuff there. So I think that brings us to exactly 8 o'clock, or what is it? 3 o'clock?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock West Coast.
Yeah.
And I want to just thank everybody for being here. Thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you at future events. And this was fantastic. So thank you also, panelists, for all of the wisdom that you shared today.
Thank you. I just realized, is Cork the new SPARC?
Yes, SPARC is the new Cork.
I mean, sorry.
Yeah. Supporting your purpose with action, resources, and connections. I'm still learning the acronym.
We're cool.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you. Thank you all.